This is CNN Breaking News.
The breaking news just into CNN, a major decision from the U.S. Supreme Court. We've learned the Supreme Court has now allowed the release of the former President Trump's tax returns to a New York prosecutor now investigating his businesses. Our Jessica Schneider has been covering this morning and for the last several weeks and months. This is a very big development here.
It is, Jim, and a big loss for the former President Trump. As you said, we've been waiting on this decision since the middle of October, and now, the middle of February, we're finally getting this decision from the Supreme Court. They are saying that the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, can, in fact, get access to former President Donald Trump's tax returns. This is something that has been playing out in the courts for more than a year now. Remember, it was back in July when the Supreme Court said, no, President Trump, you do not have absolute immunity from these records that the prosecutor in Manhattan is seeking. This went back down to the lower courts. President Trump's attorneys continued to fight it in the lower courts, saying that this request was overbroad, it was in bad faith. The lower court said, no, you have to hand over these records. But Trump's team continued to fight it to the Supreme Court. That was back in the middle of October. We've been waiting all of this time to determine what the Supreme Court would do. And now, a month after Trump left office, they have said that these tax records can be handed over. Now, it's important to note the public will likely not get an immediate glimpse, if any glimpse, at these tax returns because these will be handed over to the Manhattan District Attorney, where they will then go to the grand jury as part of this larger investigation. This is that investigation into the hush money payments that were paid and as to whether the Trump organization did any wrongdoing in covering up these hush money payments. And there's also this investigation into bank and insurance fraud, the possibility that that was committed by the Trump organization as well. So it's important to note the public will not immediately see these tax returns. This is going to the grand jury, which operates in secret. But of course, Jim and Poppy, this is a major loss for the former president. He and his legal team have been fighting the release of these tax returns for years now. The president said throughout his presidency that he would not release the tax returns, but now they will be out there. They will be handed over because these banks have said that they will comply. They'll be handed over to the district attorney, which will then continue in its investigation here, guys.
Okay, Jess, it's really significant breaking news. Thank you. Stand by for us. Let's bring in our attorneys and experts on all of this, Laura Coates and Ellie Honig. Laura, let me begin with you, and let's talk about sort of the substance here of what Cy Vance has been waiting so long to find out if they would have access to. You're talking about allegations that the Trump corporations or company used accounting gimmicks to overstate the value of assets, also to underplay any taxes that may be due. They're also, though, barred by secrecy rules. So even when the grand jury sees these, unless something leaks, people shouldn't think that the public is going to see all this right now.
Exactly right. I mean, the idea that it goes to the grand jury, which is shrouded in secrecy for the precise purpose that you don't want to just tar and feather someone in the public square, so to speak. There has to actually be an indictment or something that will actually go to the public in the form of a criminal prosecution or trial. If it runs short of that, or if the actual factual predicate and the trial charges that might come up, if they are not based with that evidentiary thing of the tax returns, you might never see them. However, you could very well see that if there actually is a criminal prosecution, then grand jury proceedings, although they have to get court's permission to become not secret, you could use some of the evidence used by the grand jury in the actual trial. That's why they have the subpoena power. That's why they're gathering evidence. That's why you have it. And some could make its way. But you're right, Poppy. It's all contingent on the public seeing it if it actually leads to an indictment that goes to an actual trial.
All right, Ellie Honig, so let's talk about what the standard is here, because there's already a lot of public information out there reporting about how Trump and his businesses might have stretched, right, the tax law. But let's be frank, the tax law is written very liberally, right, for a lot of these businesses, and a lot of people stretch, and that's, they hire lawyers to do that. What is the standard here to establish that Trump or his businesses broke the tax law?
Yeah, Jim. So the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is going to have to prove that Donald Trump or anybody else in the Trump organization knowingly and intentionally either inflated or deflated the value of their assets. And so the tax records will be a key part of that, Donald Trump's tax returns, because the question is going to be, well, let's say they valued a certain property, a certain building. Did they value it differently in their bank applications than they did in their tax returns, for example? And if there's a discrepancy there, then that's where the sort of the heart of these criminal charges are going to come into play. As Laura said, we're not likely to actually see these tax returns unless and until this case gets to trial. But the tax returns are a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, Poppy, it's such a fascinating point there. Like, do you inflate them when you want to show that you're richer so that you can get loans from banks, right? But deflate them when you want to show the government you're poorer so you don't want to have to pay more taxes? I mean, that's the question here, Poppy.
It is. So, Abby, let me bring you just in on the politics of all this, because we're talking about the former president who held office not that long ago. And Cy Vance had agreed, Abby, to this 3-month delay. Remember back in October, like, OK, the election's coming up. We're just like going to wait and see and pause in it. Now we know what he and his team has access to. But this is separate from the House request, Abby, to also have access to the president's tax returns. It's a totally separate issue. I wonder about the political implications on either side.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made the point earlier that just because these are released to the New York prosecutors doesn't mean that it becomes public, but that's a very different situation when you're talking about Congress.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not by default going to become public when it goes to Congress, but it's far more likely to be leaked or to be in the hands, frankly, of political players, which I think was the concern from the Trump team from the very beginning. But at the same time, you know, Congress has this oversight, capability. That is one of the things that they are allowed to do. And so what they do with that information is certainly their purview. And at this point, it's not clear to me what venues the Trump team has to stop this. He's no longer president. He can't sort of hide behind this executive privilege or whatever executive legal arguments that they had been making up until this point. So it completely changes the game. And we know that that's one of the things that Trump has been very concerned about down in Mar-a-Lago. He knows that there is this legal dragnet that is closing in on him from all fronts, whether it is from Congress or from prosecutors.
And Abby, as Jess mentioned, Mazars, which is the accounting firm, had agreed, Jim, right, to do whatever was decided here by the High Court, that they would totally comply. So I think, Jim, this means it's all coming.
Well, that's the thing. They're not going to challenge it, at least.
No.
But we shouldn't count out the president finding another way to try to fight back. We'll see.